Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Morgantown Public Library System's Fiction 101. This is the April 2022 version. And this month we are doing surprising reads, genre bending, unexpected, things that just, kind of made us take a step back. So we're going to explore some of our longtime favorites that you should be able to find, on the shelves, either digitally or in our branch and main library location, and maybe some new things that we're looking forward to seeing. So I'm looking forward to this one. I think this will be a lot of fun because what's unexpected is different for everybody, right? We didn't draw straws. Who's going first? John, you're unmuted, so I'm going to call on you first.
Yeah, well, this was partly inspired because Shelby sent me a TikTok about a weird book called The Boxman by a Japanese author named Kobo Abe. And it's just about a guy who spends his life living inside of a box. And I was really interested to explore this, so I read the book, mostly.
Mostly. There's no shame in mostly. There's a lot of books I've read mostly.
I mean, it really caught me off guard. It was not what I was expecting going in. Kind of became something I didn't really want it to in the middle, and then immediately jumped back to being more than I expected it to be by the end of the book. And then I looked into his other work, and that's one of his lesser known novels. He also has Woman in the Dunes, which is about a guy who gets trapped in a town and spends the rest of his life shoveling sand with this bizarre woman in a hole. Or Kangaroo Notebook, which is about a guy who wakes up and discovers that all of the hair follicles on his legs have turned into daikon radishes. And that is the most normal thing in the book. So then I just did a whole deep dive into weird literature. I started looking into authors like Italo Calvino, who is an Italian author. What is the name of the one book? Yes, Invisible Cities is the book I know him for most, which is just a series of epic poems being shared between Genghis Khan and Marco Polo.
That could happen. Totally.
But then I learned about If on a Winter's Night, a Traveler, which is frankly the most fascinating concept for a book that I've ever read. It's exactly what I've always wanted out of postmodern literature. It is about you reading the book, If on a Winter's Night, a Traveler, as the narrator describes both the plot of the book and what is happening as you are reading the book. And there's a lot of crossover, there's descriptions of things like smoke covering up the words as you were reading it. It's really a fascinating novel. It's definitely what I'm going to dive into basically as soon as this ends.
That's great. So that is definitely, I would say, the deep end of like experiential, reading, where, it's maybe less about the novel or the story and more about this experience that the author has crafted, which is interesting and definitely can be unexpected. Lexi, what have you got on your unusual or unexpected reads list?
I brought props.
Oh, yay!
So my friend got me this book for my birthday, and I got into it having no idea what it was about. And I discovered that not only does it incorporate a really out-of-the-box idea, but that it's also the most genre-bending book I've ever read in my life. It's called Long Division by Kiese Lehmann. And what you do is you read to the midway point, and then everything eventually goes upside down, which causes you to flip it and then start from the back and read back to the middle, and it meets in the middle. It's one of those books that incorporates time travel as like the only sci-fi related thing in the book.
Yeah.
Standalone. It also incorporates a love story, satire / comedy, historical fiction. It's about a young Black man learning to appreciate and find himself. It's a coming of age story. And he discovers a book where the main character shares his name, and he has quite a unique name. And he's like, well, this book can't possibly be about me because it takes place during the civil rights movement, and he wasn't born during the civil rights movement. He was born in the early 2000s. But then he ends up time traveling and finding lost parts of his family and lost parts of himself. And it's just a really, really great story, and was definitely an unexpected read for me because I ended up not only enjoying it more than I expected to, but also discovering things about it that I didn't expect at all. And that's a relatively new book. I think it was written in the 2010s and published in the late 2010s, and it's being added to our collection fairly soon. The other book that I wanted to talk about is a classic, Beloved by Toni Morrison. It's literary fiction or historical fiction, but it also incorporates horror and a little bit of sci-fi because it's a ghost story. But definitely one of the first books that came into my mind when I was pondering genre bending books was Beloved, and I highly recommend that one as well.
Nice. Yeah, I think the time travel in romance is probably one of the most, or time travel in general is one of the most go-to genre bending things to me. The one that jumps out that now it's accepted, but was pretty big when it first came out is Outlander. Diana Gabaldon. It, presents itself as a pretty traditional historical romance, but all that happens because she fell through a mystical time portal. Oh, spoiler alert. No. If a book is more than 20 years old, I think we can say whatever we want to about it. But that's Octavia Butler's Kindred is another example, which there's a phenomenal graphic novel adaptation of that too. That I know we have at Morgantown, that sort of falls in that, using time travel, as a way to sort of tell a story from a different perspective. I have a few other ideas, but Shelby, what have you got on your list?
So I have House of Leaves by Marxie Danielski, which it's a horror novel, and it's kind of three stories told in one, told in footnotes, and you have to turn the book a lot. The text often goes in various directions. It's the only book I've ever had to Google like, where's footnote 153? And of course the answer is like upside down on page 83, you silly person. And there's like codes in there to decipher as well, which was fun. It was a really fun book to read. It can also be hard to get a hold of at the library because it's a really long book to read. I feel like every time I see it go out, it takes like 2 to 3 months for it to come back because it just takes so long to read. And then the other book I haven't read yet, it's on my next to read list, All the Birds in the Sky by Charlie Jane Anders, which is genre bending in that it's kind of written to be a classic sci-fi one chapter, and then like a classic fantasy another chapter. It follows 2 characters. One's a mad scientist, and that's where the sci-fi comes in, and then the other character's learning to be a witch. So that's where the fantasy comes in, and she tries to kind of switch tone a little bit to kind of match the genre she's following. And I'm really excited to read that one. Those were my two.
Nice. Maybe we should have a whole episode on fiction with footnotes, because that is one of my favorite things. Good Omens is one of my all-time favorite books, and it's the footnotes in it that just absolutely keep it in that top tier of favorites forever for me. So I'm gonna kind of talk about a couple of kids' books, because I love kids' books, first of all. That's always true. But I think that you get to see a lot of experimentation in kids' books, especially in a lot of middle grade fiction that you don't maybe see other places too, because kids don't have these, fixed mindsets about what genres they like to read. And things that were really surprising when they first came out have now sort of set the stage, like things like The Invention of Hugo Cabaret by Brian Selznick, which was, when that first came out, librarians were like, what do we do with this? Because it's like half illustrations, but it's not a picture book, but it's also not a graphic novel. And we've seen just so many books explode in children's publishing that fall along those lines. So while it was once surprising, now it is almost the norm in children's publishing. And another one of my favorites, and I did not write the author down, is Lulu and the Brontosaurus. Is it Cynthia Voigt? So I love this book because Lulu is walking along in the forest one day, and she is kind of a spoiled brat, and she comes across Brontosaurus and is like, you will be my friend. And the Brontosaurus is like, you're not very nice. I don't want to be your friend. And so they have this back and forth through the whole book about what it takes to be a friend. But then it gets to the point at almost the end of the book, and the author inserts herself into the book and is like, I don't like that ending. Let's do it again. And when reading this book with my own personal kid, who was probably 6 or so at the time, it blew his mind. He's like, how does that happen? How do you do that? And so there's like 3 or 4 different endings to the book. And each time it was just absolutely like world changing for him, that the author had control over the story and not him as the reader. And it was a great thing to experience as a parent and as a book lover. And definitely surprising for everybody. And I have not read this one, but I'm passing this series along because I asked my kids for other ideas, and they said by far the most my son has read, it's a very well read person. He read these a couple years ago, so probably 4th or 5th grade or so reading level. And he said it was the most surprising book he's ever read was The Dactyl Hill Squad by Danielle Jose Older. So this is a historical fiction about New York City during the Civil War, but dinosaurs still roam the earth, and they are part of the fighting forces. And so it presents real, true history that kids may not be overly aware of, like such as the draft riots in New York City, but also orphans escaping on flying dinosaurs. So I can't think of a more genre bending. I mean, I guess technically dinosaurs are history, and so is Civil War. There's just a couple million years in between the two of them. But they're funny, they're adventure, they're your pretty classic middle grade, like quest, friendship, found family type of a story where they're fighting a war, but also with dinosaurs. And so it's a little bit of a hard sell for some people, but when you get the book in the right kids' hands, they're just absolutely blown away by it because, again, dinosaurs. those are some of my favorite kid ones. I feel like I have a lot that could be on this list, more so than usual. And sometimes we read them just because they are so strange, like the Wisteria Society of Lady Scoundrels, which I picked up, and it starts almost in the middle of a sentence, which normally I think would be really off-putting to me. But in this case, I was like, why is this book so weird? And like it starts like in the middle of a battle with pirates, but also like Regency romance, and or maybe it's Victorian, I can't remember, but it was so weird. So that I'm not really usually committed to reading things that aren't like, I don't know, comfortable and easy, or like I have to read this. But this book was just so weird from the first paragraph that I'm like, I need to know why this is happening, or were there pages missing? But the second one in that series just came out this in March. So I wasn't the only one who liked it, apparently, when I got through it all. But yeah, there's pirates, so that's fun. And witches and flying houses, but also conventional Victorian rules about what young women can and cannot do while they're being pirates and witches. So I enjoyed that one a lot too. Any last thoughts on our more unusual picks?
Yeah, well, first of all, I was going to say it's a shame that we live in an internet age now. You can't like find the novel you just described in like an old used bookstore where you don't have the context, and it's like you have no way of knowing if the pages are missing.
Yeah.
now you can just find out. But you mentioned the author inserting themselves into the story with Judith Viorst there in Lulu and the Brontosaurus. It reminded me a lot of a technique that Kurt Vonnegut uses a lot as well. I mean, at the very end of Breakfast of Champions, spoilers for Breakfast of Champions, he confronts a fake author that he has used throughout multiple books that he has written, and basically tells him that he is not real, and forces his fictional character to grapple with that reality.
It's harsh. Yep.
It is, but it's done in a cathartic, peaceful way. Is how it came across to me on my first read. The second book I wanted to mention though was S, because I feel like it doesn't get brought up a lot. It came out a couple of years ago. It was conceived by J.J. Abrams, but written by Doug Dorst. And it's essentially, there's a full novel in there. There's an actual novel, but the story is told through annotations, colored annotations between two different characters, scribbled in the margins of the book, as well as a bunch of extra like feelers, various letters and other things that come packaged in the book as well. I've wanted to read it for years. I have an unopened copy at home. But it's just a fascinating story, because there is an actual novel there, but the real bulk of the story is supposed to come from this emotional connection that you develop with the other people who have read the book and are communicating through it.
Interesting. Yeah, there's lots of other books that have all the add-on things too. Maybe that's a whole other discussion as well. But we're getting close to time here. Any other, I take notes every time and end up walking away with books that I want to read. So we would love.
Just watch the Fiction 101.
Yeah, we would love to hear your comments and thoughts about, and book suggestions. Please put them in the comments when this posts on Facebook. And otherwise, if there's no other last thoughts, we will see you back here next month. I have no idea what we're talking about in May yet. Something exciting, I'm sure.
It is always.
Thanks for joining us, everybody. And if you're looking for your next great read, don't forget to reach out to us too. Shelby runs our Readers Advisory Program and can get some book suggestions together for you based on things you like and don't like. But anybody that at any service desk at any location at Morgantown Public Library will be happy to help. Have a great day. Happy reading.